Hello friends. Hey, thanks for all the feedback on last week's video, the brain food that I did, where I was talking about getting to December 31st and making sure that you're okay with the progress that you've had this year, being more intentional about your accomplishments and your goals for this year. This week, I'm going to have a marketing video where I talk about coming up with content for your LinkedIn status updates. And I hope you'll bear with me because this is one of the number one things that comes up in all of the LinkedIn training that I do. Many of the conversations I have with people about social media, it's about content strategy. People finally figured out LinkedIn's so valuable, and now they're trying to come up with content. They struggle every time I'm talking to companies and people. This conversation happened last week, so that's how I come up with the content for each of these weekly videos. I think about what happened over the last week, and a week and a half ago now, I met Jeff von Seldenek at Lenexa Public Market for coffee. And we were talking about some things that he was trying to work on in his updates with LinkedIn. And we were talking about content and how to come up with buckets for the content. And he was actually referring me to a prospective client and a friend of his that was a neighbor of his. And it's the company called Artisan Solar here in town. And I did LinkedIn training with their sales team last week. And one of the things we talked about was coming up with content. They're actually a good way down the path with that, but there were a lot of things that we came up with that they can talk about more. So at a high level, what you're trying to do is you want to come up with buckets of content, themes, things that you know that you're going to fill. I will tell you that the best practice is, so I do it every week because I've been doing it every week since 2009. So I have a lot of experience with coming up with content on the fly, and I have no problem doing that. Many people and many companies struggle with coming up with content on the fly when they are supposed to sit down and write their blog or do their video. A vast majority of people struggle with coming up with content. So my encouragement would be to actually think through the next 2, 3, even 4 weeks of content and come up with your buckets of things that you're trying to fill with your content updates. A lot of times we'll talk about client success stories. You may or may not be able to tell the client's name or show pictures of their logo or any of that stuff, but you can tell a client success story in some way. Maybe focusing on your team members or the company as you build the company and the good team members that you have on your team. Definitely something community focused where you're giving back to the community. And then thought leadership stuff. That's my brain food series that I do on my channel and my blogging. And so one of the tips that I've talked about, it's been a long time, I went and looked back. It's been a while since I talked about a great way to jar your thoughts loose on these story ideas to fill those buckets. And the two simple things to look at are your calendar for the last couple weeks and your photo gallery on your phone. Let's start with the calendar for the last couple weeks. I actually just did this. In the last couple weeks, I mentioned already that I did LinkedIn training at Artisan. So I could do a story about Artisan Solar and what I learned about those guys. And they have an awesome process. And I'm all about green and energy. And the crazy thing is, and I'm not selling for Artisan right now, but the idea that blew me away is that they can actually pay off the cost of putting in solar for a warehouse in a period of years and then start making money in the cost savings. I love that kind of thing. And so in the last couple of weeks, I was at Artisan doing LinkedIn training. My good friend Ken Bramble introduced me to Fuel House in Bonner Springs. And a lot of people haven't heard about Fuel House. It's a member group for typically car enthusiasts. But Fuel House has become also a good gathering place for things like 10 and 2 coffee, where you keep your hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel because it's a car club place, right? I love that brand, 10 and 2 coffee. There's a ice cream shop and all this other stuff. But what's over there that's amazing is Quentins barbecue. Oh my gosh, they do burgers that are burger and rib meat mixed together. Brisket meat mixed together, and really good beef burn ends and all this stuff. So I was at Fuel House and I could do an update on that. I've got pictures of it. I'll put some of these pictures up as I'm talking about it. Of Fuel House and the good food that I had there. And I ended up taking my parents there with my wife and I on Sunday to have burgers at Fuel House to introduce them to Quentins. I also did some work with Green Earth Cleaning last week on social media strategy and a bunch of tools like RoboForm and things like that. There's a bunch of stories that I could tell in my blogging and my videos about the tips and tricks that I was sharing with Green Earth Cleaning, my good friend Karen over there. We went to Jaspers recently. I'd never been, at 103rd and State Line, and I'd never been for dinner. And they have this fresh tableside mozzarella thing they're doing now. And I hope I'm not boring you, but like, if you look at your calendar for the last week or two, there are so many things that you might just immediately pass over as a story idea. But if you think about it, just look at it for a second and think, how can I make this a story, either telling a story about somebody I care about in business, or a friend that, or a golden nugget that I learned in doing this event or whatever, and you'll come up with a bunch of great content ideas. So after Jaspers, I was looking at the calendar, and I went to Church of the Resurrection's food pantry area to do food sorting on Friday. That's something I do once a month, and that's a community-focused one, right? That's me giving back to the community with my time and my hands. And then the last one is, I'll put up a couple pictures. I used to hate mowing the yard. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I adopted the Ego electric system for doing things in the yard, like trimmers and mowers and snow blowers and edgers and all kind. I have a chainsaw that I've used a couple times, but it's come in really handy. So anyway, I found an attachment for the, this is silly. I found an attachment for the back of my mower that's, it's a striper. It's a striping kit is what it's called. So I bolted that onto the back of my Ego mower, and it looks like a playing field, like a baseball field or something. When you're done going back and forth, it puts the stripes in the yard. So I could talk about the fact that I love Ego electric stuff, or that I put that out to one of my peer groups, and a friend of mine said he has the exact same striper in his mower that's in my neighborhood. It was just hilarious, those kinds of things. And those ideas all came from my calendar, just looking back on my calendar for the last couple weeks that I could do a blog or a video about. And the next thing I did was looked at my photo gallery. For this video, I was like, okay, well, what can I go pull up that I could say happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks? And so I made a list of those things. The caveat here is that you have to be taking pictures with your phone, with your cell phone, to be able to use the photo gallery for idea generation, right? So get into the habit of getting your phone out and thinking about, oh, this might be a featured image for a story. I'm going to take this photo. Click. Whether you're at a networking event, you're at a chamber event, whatever, you're out in the city and you see this cool thing when you're at a mixer, or you're going to a prospective client to sell and you see their cool building or whatever, you take a picture, be taking pictures. So when I looked through my recent photo gallery, one of the things that struck me was my good friend Todd Whitaker sent me some socks from his company. So I got a picture of those to put up there. And then I went to Wichita. I grew up in Wichita. Some of you might know that, but many of you don't. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and Jeff Potts and I went and met our good friend Troy Wolf, and all three of us do a lot of business together, web development, different things like that. And so we spent the weekend there doing all kinds of things, but one of the fun things is that Jeff is very, very good with barbecue and Traegers and things like that. So I've got a couple pictures to put up about the steak and the prime rib, or the brisket that we did on the Traeger. I say we, I was just hands helping because I don't know what I'm doing, but it turned out great and it was great food. And I could talk about the web development stuff that we do together. I could talk about the importance of getting together with your peers outside of just a quick coffee, spending more quality time with them. We talked about all kinds of life stuff, and our relationships are better for it. So I could talk about my Wichita trip. And I talked about the mower striper kit already. And then, oh yeah, the shirt that I'm wearing right now is a brand new Blue Guru shirt. This is the first time I've worn it on camera. And it's a Callaway polo, and I love the Callaway stuff. And my good friend Keith Steiniger, he does all of my marketing and promotional materials for me. And he set this up for me, so I wanted to put that, on the list. I have a picture of this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got those new Callaway shirts. And I could talk about Keith, like I just did. Talk about Keith, and I could talk about the importance of doing branded things for your company and for client giveaways and all that kind of stuff. So between my calendar and my photo gallery and just thinking about the buckets that I need to fill, I am to the point, and you could be to the point very quickly with a little effort, where you have more content and stories to tell than you even realize. And it's already the things that you're doing. That's the beautiful thing about this. The only hard part for you is to be thinking like a storyteller. You need to be taking more photos if you're not already. You need to be thinking about, oh, how can I capture this moment, or that thing, the joke I heard, the quote I just heard. I mean, all these things, the golden nugget I heard at a peer group meeting. I have a Google Doc where I write all these things down as my future video ideas to do the stories about. And I just keep adding to it. As every week goes by, I'm adding 3 or 4 things to that list so that when I sit down to do a video every week, I've already got a bunch of ideas to pull from, and I don't have to be super creative on the fly. And the reality is, for all of us, we're not always in the mood. I kind of skipped last week's video. We're not always in the mood to write stories or create content and things like that, you know? And so it's hard to kind of push it, especially video or podcasts or things like that, audio, where they're capturing your voice and how you're looking and feeling when you're doing the story. Because if you're tired and run down or frustrated or whatever, it's really hard to create content. And I've had days where I'm a little beat because I've done too much yard work and too much work. And so I will actually skip that video that week sometimes, or I'm on vacation or whatever. I give myself permission. But for the most part, I'm hitting stories every week. Those go out as status updates on LinkedIn, and it raises awareness and keeps all of my referral partners, the people that will refer me business, it keeps me top of mind with them and keeps that pipeline going. It keeps the pipeline filled and going. I've never had to do traditional marketing. I've been doing this almost 14 years now as a blue guru, and it has always worked because the reality is it's all about your relationships caring about you. Prospects that check you out and see all the stories that the real stories that you're telling about the company picnic you guys just had and the cool thing you did for the new client and all that kind of stuff. And it just really pulls people, it draws people to you when you're telling authentic, real stories that you care about. So I hope that this marketing video is helpful. I know it's going to be a little bit long. This was kind of a free thinking one like they all are. I'm not going to edit this one down as much because I think there were enough points in here that you guys should have heard that I'm not going to cut it down a ton. Let me know in the comments if you got value from this idea of how to come up with content to tell your stories and do status updates on LinkedIn or on your blog or videos or whatever. Hope you're having a good week, and I'll see you next week.